The story of a son who, after turning 18, his father sets a condition to pay for housing, which changes his outlook on life and family. Nathan Henderson was born in Ohio, in the city of Toledo. His parents, Thomas and Linda, lived in a one-story house in the southwest of the city. Thomas worked as an auto mechanic in a local workshop, and Linda worked as a nurse at a children's hospital. The family did not have much, but the basic needs were covered. They did not travel, did not buy new cars, but they had a roof over their heads, regular meals and access to basic education. When Nathan was 5 years old, his mother died of cancer. After that, his father remained the sole guardian. Thomas did not have the habit of expressing emotions, and after his wife's death he became even more withdrawn. He did not hug his son, was not interested in his affairs at school, did not say warm words. He provided housing, food, and basic discipline. Nathan grew up a quiet, reserved boy. His childhood was not happy, but it was not disastrous either. He was not physically abused, but he felt like a stranger in his own home. In high school, Nathan had no friends. He sat in the back of the class, avoided socializing, and did homework to get passing grades. His father was not interested in his grades, only demanding that he stay out of trouble. At 15, Nathan started working after school at a grocery store, then at a car wash. He bought his own clothes and paid for his cell phone. Thomas didn't spend any money on him, except for food and utility bills. He often hinted that his son should become independent as soon as possible. On the day Nathan turned 18, his father told him that from now on he would have to pay for his own living expenses. Thomas put a sheet of paper on the kitchen table with calculations: rent, utilities, internet, and water. The total came to $550 a month. Nathan didn't argue. He just took the sheet and went to his room. The next morning, he got a part-time job to help pay the bills. Life didn't change much. He still lived in his room, which had an old bed, desk, and closet. There was no decor on the walls. He was entitled to a share of groceries in the refrigerator. In the evenings, he and his father didn't have dinner together. Thomas would come home from work and watch TV in the kitchen, while Nathan would sit in his room and write resumes on job sites. He didn't plan on going to college, he had no money and no support. His goal was to find steady, full-time employment and rent his own apartment. A few months later, he got a job at a furniture warehouse on the outskirts of town. The work was hard, physically demanding, but the pay was $18 an hour. The schedule was full, with no health insurance, but with the possibility of overtime. He started saving some of his money, keeping notes in a notebook, calculating expenses. Thomas took money from him every month, without commenting or saying thank you. Nathan didn't expect a thank you. He just wanted to get out. 8 months after starting work at the warehouse, Nathan began looking for an apartment. He looked at ads, compared prices, analyzed neighborhoods. There weren't many options in the city within his budget. Finally, he found a small studio in northwest Toledo. The rent was $700 a month, including water and trash. He signed a 6-month lease, paid a deposit, and moved in. The first few days in his new apartment were unusual. The studio was small, with one room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. The room had a fold-out bed, an old table, and a single metal cabinet. Nathan bought them through an online ad. He didn't have many things. All his belongings fit into 2 large bags. The internet was down for the 3rd day. The refrigerator was half empty, but he had enough simple groceries. He didn't complain about the silence. He didn't feel lonely, because he was used to being alone. Working in the warehouse took up most of his time. He left at 7 in the morning and returned at 7 in the evening. He sometimes gave himself weekends, sometimes worked overtime. He bought food at a cheap supermarket, cooked rice, pasta, fried eggs. He didn't go to cafes, didn't meet people, didn't communicate with former classmates. His phone rarely rang. Thomas didn't call. Nathan didn't call him either. They stopped contacting each other the day he took the last bag out of his parents' house. Several months passed. Life became stable but monotonous. He slept, worked, ate, and slept again. One evening, when he returned from work, he found a letter in his mailbox. In the envelope was a bill and unpaid debt for medical care he had received while still living in his parents' house. The hospital demanded payment in the amount of $320. The letter said he was responsible because he was an adult. He didn't remember agreeing to the treatment, but his details were in the files. He paid the amount the following week and then cut back even more. 5 months after moving in, Nathan found himself with a little extra money. He decided to open a savings account at the bank. He put $1,000 in it. It was his first financial cushion of his own. He felt more confident. The following month, he put another $400 in. He didn't have a specific goal, but he felt it was necessary to be prepared for the unexpected. One morning, he received a message on his phone. It was Thomas. The message contained just one sentence: "I need you to help with the electricity bill." Nathan didn't answer. The next day, the message was repeated. Then again. 3 days later, Thomas called, but Nathan didn't pick up the phone. He didn't feel obligated to help. He was already paying his share. He had left the house because he had been billed as a stranger. Now he was not obligated to return. A week later, Thomas wrote again. The message was longer. He described how his hours at work had been cut, how his bills had increased, how it was hard to pay for one person. He didn't apologize, didn't explain the past, just reminded him that Nathan had lived in this house most of his life. Nathan read and deleted the message. He didn't feel angry. Only emptiness. He didn't feel like he had a family left. At the warehouse, he was made the shift supervisor. He now supervised 3 other workers, responsible for schedules and task assignments. The pay was a little higher, $21 an hour. Stability had come, and with it the routine fatigue. He would wake up tired, go to bed thinking about the next day. On the weekends, he would mop the floors, clean the kitchen, and do the laundry. His whole life was spent in simple, repetitive actions. But it was his life. Without outside demands, without external obligations. One evening he decided to walk downtown. He went to a bookstore, looked at a few biographies, bought a cheap notebook and a pen. When he got home, he wrote on the first page, "What do I do next?" Then he sat for a long time, holding the pen, but wrote nothing more. Another 4 months passed. Nathan continued to work in the warehouse, performing the duties of shift supervisor, sometimes replacing the manager in his absence. He did well, was punctual, was never late, and completed all assignments. The department head noted him in his performance report and said that perhaps in the future there would be a vacancy for administrator. Nathan showed no emotion, but he noted it to himself. A promotion would mean more money, less physical labor, and the opportunity to save for the future. He kept his apartment clean. He didn't have any guests. On weekends, he usually mopped the floor, shook out the rug, and checked his food supply. He kept a spending journal and Updated the spreadsheet every month. He had no debt. He already had over $3,000 in his savings account. He didn't buy new clothes, didn't use subscriptions, didn't spend money on leisure activities. Sometimes he watched old movies on his laptop. Sometimes he sat in silence. In August, he learned that his father had had a heart attack. Thomas's neighbor, a man named David, whom Nathan had met a few times as a child, wrote about it. David wrote that Thomas was in the hospital, stable, but would need rehabilitation. The message ended with the words, "I think you should know." Nathan didn't respond for a long time. Then he wrote thank you and closed the message. He didn't go to the hospital. He didn't call. He didn't know what to say. The following week, a letter arrived at his apartment. It was from the hospital. It included information about Thomas's medical bill over $14,000. It also included the contact information for the social worker who was handling the case. Nathan called and explained that he was not responsible for the payment, that he was not a dependent, and had no legal obligations. The worker asked if there were any relatives who could help. Nathan said no. The conversation ended without any commitment. David wrote again, informing him that Thomas had been discharged from the hospital, that he could not work yet, and that he was having difficulty getting around. A neighbor asked Nathan to come over, at least for a few hours. Nathan did not respond. A few days later, he received another message. He did not ask for help. Just sit next to you if you can. I don't know who else he has left. On Saturday, Nathan took a bus to the neighborhood where he grew up. He came out to a familiar house, saw that the kitchen windows were open. He rang the doorbell, no one answered. He knocked. A minute later he heard slow footsteps. Thomas opened the door. He was wearing old pants, a t-shirt, and a medical bandage on his chest. He looked older than Nathan remembered. His hair was gray, his hands were shaking. They looked at each other in silence. Thomas stepped aside, and Nathan went in. Almost nothing had changed in the house. The same furniture, the same TV, the same stains on the ceiling. There was a smell of damp in the air. Thomas slowly sat down in a chair. Nathan stood by the door. Then he went into the kitchen, filled the kettle with water, and put it on the stove. He found some tea in the cupboard, took out 2 cups. They drank the tea in silence. Then Thomas closed his eyes and dozed off in the chair. Nathan sat down opposite. Half an hour later, he got up, turned off the stove, left the house, and walked to the bus stop. The next day, he returned. He brought a bag of groceries with him: bread, milk, rice, and some canned goods. He placed them on the kitchen table. Thomas sat in the same position. They didn't speak again. This time, Nathan stayed longer, checked the medicine cabinet, rearranged the shelves, cleaned the sink. He came back a few more times. It wasn't interesting, it wasn't pleasant, it wasn't important. But he did it regularly. For the next few weeks, Nathan came to his father's house every Saturday. He brought groceries, checked on the medicine, and sometimes helped with small tasks: moving a chair, changing a light bulb, washing dishes. Thomas still barely spoke. Sometimes he nodded. Sometimes he just stared out the window. Their meetings were brief but regular. Nathan treated them like just another duty. Without emotion, without expectations. He never lost the need to control his expenses. He kept records, counted every purchase. He continued to save some of his money. The work in the warehouse was stable, but not easy. Fatigue accumulated. Sometimes his back and arms hurt. He did not complain. All his days had the same rhythm. He did not read the news, did not use social networks, did not make acquaintances. He had no one but himself. One day he received a message from the warehouse manager. He invited him to a short interview for a new vacancy, assistant administrator. It was a position with a fixed salary. Less physical labor, more office routine. Nathan agreed. A week later he was officially transferred. He was allocated a separate workplace, a computer, a 9-to-5 schedule. The first day in his new position was unusual, but calm. He quickly figured out how to work with the system, reports, documentation. After changing jobs, he had more time in the evenings. He sometimes sat by the window, writing something in a notebook. The pages were almost empty. He wrote only short phrases, "It's just a day, everything is the same, no one calls." Then he closed the notebook and went to bed. On weekends, he still went to his father. Once he brought him new slippers. Another time, he brought him window film because it was blowing from the street. Thomas said nothing. He received, was silent, sat in his chair. In mid-November, Nathan came and saw that his father was not getting out of bed. He had a high fever. He was breathing heavily. Nathan called an ambulance. Thomas was taken to the hospital. Again. This time the diagnosis was more serious: pneumonia. The doctors said that there were risks because of his weak heart. Nathan stayed in the hospital until late in the evening. Then went home. At home, he sat in silence for a long time, then went outside and just walked without a route. The next day he was back in the hospital. Thomas was asleep. The doctor said that the critical condition had passed, but the recovery would be long. He recommended that a temporary stay in a rehabilitation center be considered. Nathan went home, opened his laptop, and began searching for options. He found a facility that accepted patients with health insurance and basic needs. He filled out an online form, left his contact information. 2 days later, his application was confirmed. He arranged for Thomas's transfer. After the transfer, Thomas was already under supervision at the center. Nathan came once a week, brought clothes, brought books from the library, which he left on the bedside table. They did not talk. Once Thomas asked, "How much longer?" Nathan replied, "I don't know." There were no more words. December passed. Nathan's apartment was cold. The heating worked erratically. He slept in a sweater covered with 2 blankets. There were only the basics in the refrigerator. He bought a new pair of shoes, the old ones were already falling apart. This purchase was the first unplanned expense in a long time. In his notebook, he wrote, "I don't want to think about tomorrow." In January, Nathan continued to work in the warehouse office. He quickly mastered the routine tasks, checking schedules, generating reports, ordering supplies. His colleagues treated him neutrally. He didn't seek out company, didn't join in on conversations in the cafeteria, didn't go out to lunch with others. In his free time, he read manuals, updated internal policies, and studied the functions of the accounting system. His superiors were satisfied he didn't cause any problems, and worked clearly. When the office manager in the department got sick, Nathan temporarily took over her duties. This added more stress, but he didn't give up. He came in earlier, left later. He recorded everything in his notebook, checked data, and sent emails. He would come home in the evening, eat a canned dinner, go to bed, and wake up at 6:30. Every day was similar to the previous one. Thomas made a slow recovery at the rehabilitation center. Doctors noted that his functions had stabilized, but full independence was in question. Nathan visited him every Sunday, bringing him clothes, sometimes buying a new razor or hand cream. Thomas was mostly silent. They would spend an hour or two together, then Nathan would leave. The trip took half a day. The rest of the time Nathan spent calculating expenses, accounting for groceries, laundry schedules, and stockpiling medication for himself and his father. In early February, a social worker contacted him. She said that Thomas's condition did not allow him to return to life completely independently. The options were either a long-term stay in an institution or moving to a relative with partial supervision. She asked if Nathan would be willing to take his father in, at least temporarily. Nathan didn't answer right away. He paused. A few days later he called and said the apartment was too small. The employee replied that the state center would pay for another 60 days of stay, after which a decision would have to be made. The next month, the situation did not change. Nathan continued to work, drive, count, and remain silent. Everything was within limits. He showed no emotion. On weekends, he began to go out on foot more often, walking through empty neighborhoods, going to the library, looking through magazines, sometimes just sitting on a bench. He didn't call anyone, and no one called him. In March, he received a letter from the housing department. It said that the rent for his apartment would increase by $70 a month starting in May. Nathan reviewed his budget, cut back on food, and canceled the health insurance he had purchased on his own. Saving money became more difficult. He began to feel the instability that he had experienced before. In his notebook, he wrote, "I'm back to zero." One Sunday morning, when he arrived at the center, Thomas sat by the window, looking out into the yard. As Nathan placed the bag of belongings on the table, his father looked up and said, "I can't go back there." Those were the first clearly formulated words he had spoken in months. Nathan sat down across from him in silence. He knew he had to give an answer, but he didn't have one. For several days after that Sunday, Nathan couldn't concentrate on his work. He made no noticeable mistakes, but his concentration waned. He took longer to complete his usual tasks, rewrote his weekly report twice. During his lunch break, he sat alone, not touching his food. His thoughts kept returning to Thomas's short phrase, "I can't go back there." It was clear, formulated, firm. But there was nothing more behind it. No apologies, no questions, no mention of the past. He reviewed his spending plan again, calculating how much it would cost to care for an elderly person at home. Count the number of diapers per month, the cost of medications, food delivery, additional transportation. The amount came out to be large. His apartment had one room, a small kitchen, a cramped bathroom. Only one bed. He saw no way to arrange everything so as not to lose his own autonomy. He realized that if he agreed, he would be giving back everything he had built for 3 years. He would be bringing Thomas back into his life, not temporarily, but, most likely, forever. He met with the social worker again. She repeated the same options, returning to the house, living with a relative, long-term rehabilitation, or a state nursing home. In the latter case, the conditions were worse: shared wards, limited food, minimal supervision. The cost was transferred to the state account, and all the patient's property became the property of the foundation. Thomas's property was the house Nathan had grown up in. Dilapidated, old, but still a house. If Thomas ended up in the system, the state would sell the house, and Thomas himself would remain in the shelter with no right to return. Nathan knew that if he left it like that, in a few months the house would disappear from the register. It would be demolished or resold. He decided to go there again. Get the key, go inside, look. He arrived on Saturday morning, opened the door with the old key, went into the living room. Nothing had changed inside. The same dust, the same stained walls, old photographs on the shelf, cracked wallpaper, dark kitchen. He walked through the rooms, looked in the bathroom, went into his old bedroom. There was nothing. There bare walls, a worn mattress on the floor, an old box of magazines. He took one of the photographs on the wall, looked at it. It showed him, a child of about 6, fishing with his father. He didn't remember that day. He spent the whole day in the house. He cleaned, dusted, threw away broken things. After a few hours, the place became more livable. But he still saw this place not as a home, but as a remnant of the past. Too old, too narrow, too empty. He lay down on the mattress, closed his eyes, lay there for 20 minutes, then got up, went out, closed the door and drove back. In the evening he sat down to write. He didn't turn to anyone, didn't explain, didn't tell anyone. He simply wrote. I never asked him for help. I didn't expect anything. But he made me a stranger when he should have made me a relative. And now we stand on the same line. He needs it, I refuse. And everyone has a right to it. The following week he officially abandoned the option of cohabitation. He signed the papers to continue keeping Thomas in the system. The service representative said that the transfer process would take several weeks. During this time, someone would have to collect Thomas's belongings. Nathan agreed. He was given a list: clothes, documents, books, hygiene items. He had to transfer them to the new facility within 10 days. He packed everything in a box, registered the shipment, and left a message for the employee. He had no desire to go there in person. He did not need to see this transition. April passed without any changes. Nathan no longer visited the rehabilitation center. The shipment of belongings was completed, the documents were signed. Throughout the month, no messages came from the institutions or representatives. He had more free time, which he used for walks, reading newspapers in the library, and short trips to other parts of the city. He did not make new acquaintances, and his social activity remained at zero. He did not use social networks, did not maintain contacts, and did not respond to rare spam emails. At the end of April, a real estate agency working with a state fund called his mobile phone. He was informed that a residential building that had previously belonged to Thomas was being put up for sale. He was also offered to apply for a preliminary inspection of the property. The sale price was below market value due to the physical condition of the building and its location. He agreed to the inspection and drove to the address provided on his own. The house was in the same condition as it had been a few months earlier. The inside was clean, but there was a general sense of wear and tear, and the space was impersonal. The appliances were unusable. The furniture was outdated. The rooms were empty. The house needed a complete renovation and re-equipment. He spent a few hours there, after which he returned home. After 3 days, he withdrew from the purchase process. Instead, he began to explore other options on the rental market. He was interested in small format apartments in quieter areas. Over the course of 2 weeks, he looked at 6 properties and settled on a one-room apartment in an old brick building that had been renovated. The space had a simple kitchen, a clean bathroom, and new window glass. After signing the lease, he moved his belongings, changed his mailing address, notified his employer, and re-registered his internet service. When he moved, he found that all his belongings fit into 2 boxes and a backpack. Among his belongings were a few items that belonged to Thomas, including his ID, photos, and an old notebook. He didn't throw them away, but he didn't leave them in an accessible place either. They were packed in a separate box and placed in a closet compartment. He lived in his new apartment without incident throughout June. His work duties remained the same, and his daily routine remained the same. In July, he learned that Thomas had been transferred to a permanent shelter. The information was found in an open patient register. The document indicated only the name, date of transfer, and new status. No contact information was provided. He made no additional inquiries, asked for comments, or conducted any searches. In August, he began to keep short daily notes. The content was reduced to basic factual statements: work, shopping, weather, and the amount of money spent. The notes were kept in a small notebook. The style of writing was the same. No deeper analysis or personal reflections were recorded. In September, Nathan's apartment began to experience technical problems. The boiler broke down and water began to leak from the tap. He applied for repairs through the management company. The repairman arrived 3 days later, fixed the boiler, and replaced the gasket in the faucet. The leak stopped. All costs were covered by the landlord. There were no expenses on Nathan's part. At the same time, the reorganization of the internal department began at work. Several employees were transferred to other sectors, 3 were fired. Nathan remained in his place. His responsibilities expanded. Weekly checks of reporting on individual items were added. The schedule did not change, the salary remained unchanged. He did not raise objections. Did not initiate conversations with management. In October, the temperature dropped. The building began to provide heat from the 12th. The ventilation worked unstable, so the apartment remained high humidity. He purchased a household dehumidifier through an online store. Delivery took 4 days. The device worked normally. The humidity level stabilized. At the end of the month, he received a message from the tax service. He was warned about the need to update his electronic signature for the annual declaration. He went to the site, identified himself, updated the certificate, and saved a copy on a flash drive. No additional questions were received from the authorities. In November, his route to the office changed due to the closure of part of the road for repairs. Buses ran late. Travel time increased by 20 minutes. He adjusted his departure schedule. He did not send any complaints or appeals. The repairs lasted until the end of the month. The weather became colder. He changed his shoes, took out his winter jacket, and bought new gloves. He bought groceries at the same store, on average twice a week. His diet remained standard: breakfast at home, lunch at work, dinner with minimal expenses. There were no visits to cafes. He did not drink alcohol. Physical activity was limited to walks around the area. In December, he took out health insurance for the next year. The plan remained basic, unchanged. The premium increased by $11. He agreed to automatic debit from his account. He did not visit a medical facility. He did not buy pharmacy products. His well-being was stable. He continued to keep a diary throughout the 3 months. The format remained the same. The number of pages increased. He put the filled notebooks away in a separate box. The entire period passed without communication with relatives, acquaintances, social services, or representatives of institutions related to Thomas. Life went on as usual. No Events that would require an emotional response were recorded. One day, Nathan received a letter. It said that he was the heir to a bank account opened by his father. Everything looked official. He was invited to the bank office to confirm his identity and gain access. He went, not expecting anything special. The bank told him that his father had opened the account a long time ago. Small amounts had been deposited there regularly. Over the years, a fairly large sum had accumulated. It was supposed to be transferred to Nathan as soon as he turned 18. But he never knew about it. The account was hidden. No one reported it. There was no hint that his father had saved anything. All this time, Nathan paid for his housing, food, worked without support, and looked for a way to survive. He took the money and opened a new account in his own name. His life did not change. He lived in the same apartment, ate the same food, went to the same job. He said nothing to anyone. He did not mention his father. He did not spend the money. He just left it in the account. After some time, he withdrew the entire amount in cash. He hid it in a small metal box and stored it in a bank vault. Then he began to prepare for the move. He took his time. He slowly packed his things, threw away the unnecessary, closed personal accounts, canceled subscriptions. He didn't communicate with anyone anymore. He didn't answer calls. He didn't use instant messengers. He left no trace. One morning, he left the apartment. He didn't warn anyone. He left his keys, mobile phone, and some of his belongings in the apartment. He was never seen again. When the rent was due, the owner came to check. The door was locked. Everything inside was in its place. The TV was off. The products were expired. The documents were gone. The police opened a case. The cameras showed Nathan leaving the house with a backpack. After that, there were no records. He was never found. There was money left in the vault, which he never took. His father was still alive at the time. He didn't say anything. I just lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling.